Every year, the Canadian Cancer Society's annual Daffodil campaign brings Canadians together, and today we are highlighting the work and research that offers so much hope to those affected by cancer.
Now, back in 2017, just days before her 37th birthday, Michelle Burleigh landed in an Ontario emergency room where doctors diagnosed her with a rare and high-risk type of leukemia.
5 years later, Michelle has continued to survive against considerable odds. She joins us now to share her remarkable story. Welcome to the morning show, Michelle.
Thank you so much for having me.
Our pleasure. All right, let's go back when you found out you had leukemia. You were in your late 30s and you were otherwise healthy. Tell us what it was like to get that diagnosis at that time.
You know, it was really quite an experience. I had been feeling tired and I had not been feeling awesome, but it wasn't really terrible either. And I had been debating whether I should go to work one day and called telehealth. And I was like, I need a good excuse, so I'll call them and see what they say, and ended up in Emerge. And, you know, the doctor came in after the first round of blood tests and said something looks funny. And you know, it could be something as simple as your spleen eating up platelets, or it could be cancer. And the funny thing is I immediately thought, man, I really hope it's not my spleen because I don't want a scar on my chest before I get married. Cancer wasn't even a consideration. And when she came back in about an hour later and she asked me how old my kids were, I knew I was in big trouble. It was not even a consideration, and the most shocking thing I've ever experienced in my life.
And we understand that you had a very challenging journey to your diagnosis. Can you explain to us kind of the obstacles that you faced and the impact they had on you actually getting diagnosed and then eventually treated?
Absolutely. So, like I said, I wasn't feeling awful leading up to the diagnosis, and up until 3 weeks prior to the diagnosis, I was still working out in the gym on a regular basis. And after my last workout, I had locked a muscle in my hip, and it had stayed locked for a number of days. I made a couple of trips to the hospital where they gave me some great medications that made me feel warm and fuzzy, but completely incapable of parenting, followed by, you know, a trip to my family doctor, and then a couple of phone calls later. And I just really didn't feel like I was being taken seriously at all until that day I did make the call to telehealth. And that conversation it was shocking for me. You know, they said, I think you need to drop what you're doing right now and go to the hospital. They're like, don't drop your daughter off at school in the morning. We will call you an ambulance if you need one. And after ending up in the triage, I actually had to argue with the triage nurse because if you had looked at me, I mean, I didn't look sick, and I, you know, am relatively young to receive that kind of, you know, news. And so I just wasn't really being taken seriously, and I had to advocate hard for myself to get to that diagnosis.
Okay, so now that you brought us to where we are at now, where you are at now, and despite the really scary prognosis, you are a survivor. Talk to us about your life today and how far you've come.
Yeah, you know, so happy and so healthy. I've got to be honest with you. Those days in the hospital were really challenging, and I really had to focus on what was important to me in my life. And you know, I had decided on essentially non-negotiables for myself. I needed to get married. I needed to take my kids on a Disney cruise, and I must watch them graduate from post-secondary school. And that was really my mantra day after day. And at this point, like I said, I'm feeling great, feeling happy. Family is great. We actually did end up getting married in August 2019, which was super exciting. And now we have our Disney cruise planned for December of this year.
That is amazing. That is great news. And your story, obviously, Michelle, is one of hope. And that is exactly what the Canadian Cancer Society's Daffodil campaign, what it embodies. So can you tell us a little bit more about the campaign and especially the research that it's funding?
Yes, absolutely. So, I mean, the reality is that if I had been diagnosed with the same leukemia 25 years ago, I would not be here having this conversation with you. The work that Canadian Cancer Society does through research and also advocacy and prevention and all of that has made it possible for me to live through a diagnosis like that. And I am just so incredibly grateful for the work that they do.
What have you learned from your cancer journey that you want other Canadians to know?
Well, Carolyn, that is a loaded question. For me personally, I got very clear about what was important to me in my life, and it really helped me find, I think, my purpose in life. And so I have been able to focus a lot of attention over the last couple of years on patient advocacy, which is very, very important to me. And, you know, I realized very early on that the things that we fear in life are at times trivial, and it's allowed me to push past some of those fears that I had had in my life to progress my career and be able to do things like speak here with you today to help raise awareness for other Canadians.
All right, just finally, Michelle, what is your message to anybody who might be dealing right now, watching us here this morning, with a cancer diagnosis or a sick loved one right now?
I think it's really important that we pay really close attention to what's happening in our bodies and to just, if something doesn't feel right, if you just get that sense that something isn't right, you must talk to somebody and you must advocate for yourself. We are our best advocates, and we always need to keep that top of mind when we're dealing with illness.
Absolutely. All right, to donate to the Canadian Cancer Society's Daffodil campaign today, you can visit cancer.ca/daffodil. Michelle, great to see you this morning, and thank you so much for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
All right, coming